In 1996, a game was released called Resident Evil, and it was so good that it won a world record for the worst dialogue. But I mean, come on now. Have you heard this dialogue? It's clearly peak.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Anyway, Resident Evil. All mainline entries ranked from worst to best. Now that equals 12 games, all of which I personally enjoy, even the ones I rank lower. As I said in my previous Assassin's Creed ranking video, Resident Evil and Assassin's Creed are my favorite video game franchises of all time. I'm also a fan of Call of Duty, but only the zombies mode. So I'll do a ranking on those maps at one point. And speaking of rankings, a lot of you who see this are probably new viewers, and some of you came from my first video, and hey, welcome back. And I do just want to say this will not be a rankings channel. I have other videos in progress that have nothing to do with ranking anything. Like last time, I have some brief criteria impacting my placements of the games. 1. How good of a survival horror it is. 2. Length and story. 3. Characters. 4. Replayability. 5. Setting. And 6. The bonus content. And like last time, I may not verbally address each criteria in my rankings, but they still factor in. And just like last time, remember that this is all my opinion. And if you disagree, that's okay. And drop your own personal rankings in the comments. I'd love to read them. Also, I am combining the remakes and the originals, but the gameplay used for them is going to be the remakes just because it's easier for me to grab the gameplay of those. Also, when I was trying to record Code Veronica, it wasn't cooperating with me, so I'm just going to use the cinematics from the game. Now, there's not any parts of these games that I would say are bad, as they all have good qualities, but they also have parts that suck, some more than others, and I'll try to address the good and bad parts for each entry. And unlike last time, after every ranking to more easily visualize my opinion on it, I will be placing it on this tier list. Well, let's go ahead, leave the safe room, and get right into the list.
Resident Evil 0.
Now, this is probably the one that it's very hard for me to say that I actually like. And no, it's not because it's too hard. The lack of an item box, limited inventory space, and tight camera angles are actually things that I like. It does suck that we will never get another game with these mechanics. The game's story is good enough. It's nice to get a prequel to the first and learn why Wesker and co are looking for Bravo Team in the Arklay Mountains. We get to see Wesker and Birkin interacting with each other pre-Giant Eyeball. There's also Man who can control these weird leeches through Song, who is also the queen of the leeches, the Andals, and the First Men. But it's cool that we get to learn more about the history of the Umbrella Corporation and how it's always been corrupt, enough to the point where they even killed their own founder. Rebecca and Billy are okay enough as characters, and the dialogue is okay. Its main story lasts about 6 to 8 hours, and like I said before, the game has good survival horror elements, but the major thing that brings this game down is its partner system. Now, the partner system is something that can be very helpful in Resident Evil games, but in this one, more often than not, I found the second character would just constantly shoot, and then when I would need their help, there just wouldn't be any ammo for them to help out, even if I had them set to not attack. The character switching and telling them to stay put feels very clunky. Other than that, the settings quickly got uninteresting. I actually really like the Eclectic Express, but past that, it's just facilities, which are boring. On top of that, the actual enemies that you fight are nothing special either. And despite being able to replay the story as Wesker himself, there isn't much replayability to be found with this game. This game feels like it had so much potential, but in the end, fumbled the ball like Daniel Jones.
Trying to stay upright and he trips!
Resident Evil Revelations.
Now, I should say right off the bat, I'm not sure why, but I just don't like big boats as settings in video games. But at least this one didn't come out of nowhere.
The boat? How the fuck did that get here?
The Queen Zenobia, while having some cool areas and rooms, just feels too limiting of a setting for me and just isn't that interesting. Besides, some of the only other settings we get is a plane crash site in the mountains and a beach that thankfully doesn't make you old. The story is okay. Nothing too special. The whole concept of there being two identical boats to throw off Chris just feels stupid and only serves as a reason for him to be like, hey, this door on the other boat uses a trident key. Maybe this one will too. And the game doesn't feel very long. The story is kind of brought down by its characters though. Mainly Jessica, who is just trying to flirt with Chris throughout the whole thing.
Here, Jessica, we have a promise to keep. Let's go.
Great. A cruise, just the two of us.
But Chris is focused on finding Jill and not Jessica in her very impractical diving suit. I like Jill's partner Parker a lot though. And Jill and Chris are still good in this game, of course. Keith and Quint are there, I guess. But the villain is obvious and isn't threatening at all. Raymond being the guy in the gas mask was very obvious considering he was the only other person that we had seen on the Zenobia. The whole scanning mechanic is alright, and the overall gameplay is fun, but a bit too easy at some points. But even with the gameplay being fun, it wasn't enough to rank this game any higher.
Resident Evil 5.
This game was highly controversial at launch, and whether or not you agree with some of the stuff that's said about it is up to you. But I, however, am not going to address that any further. This game is like Resident Evil 4, at home, gameplay-wise. Were you annoyed by the fact that Ashley never helped you out and blew your eardrums out every time she got grabbed? Well, now your partner also has a gun, except is somehow more vulnerable. I swear, 90% of my deaths in this game were from Sheva. This is also the point where the series lost its horror footing. It became more of an all-out action instead of horror-filled. And while there are still some elements of older games, there's also, Chris fighting a boulder. There isn't much to this story either. You learn some good lore and see where the progenitor virus came from originally, and the set pieces and puzzles in the ruins are awesome, but easily the best parts of this game are chapters 5-3 through 6-3. Why? Because Wesker is present and is voiced brilliantly by DC Douglas. The fights with Wesker are fun because they make you have to strategize a little bit, especially when in the ruins, and the climactic fight in the volcano, even with the boulder punching, is one of the best parts. This game still suffers a lot from its gameplay. Despite being very similar to Resident Evil 4, this game feels more clunky and just not as fun, which leads me to not having any motivation to replay the game besides the Wesker sequences. This game really gives you no breathing room, and it's not like it's a hard game, but it's super linear feeling, and the constant waves of basic enemies just make it feel repetitive. But at least there's punching boulders. Now, so first off, it looks like this game is finally getting the remake that it deserves, and that will for sure in the future bump it up on my rankings. But for now, one major thing that brings it down is how outdated the gameplay is and how it feels. This game does have one of the best stories of the entire series, though very fleshed out, but its age is what really drags it down for me. The gameplay by today's standards is a bit clunky. The direction in which you're supposed to travel isn't always clear enough. Some of the puzzles, looking at you, Tiger Puzzle, aren't fun to do and don't feel rewarding. Steve is awful. Might be worse than Jessica, actually. But we do have Chris and Claire. The Ashford twins are interesting enough as villains, and as far as setting goes, I really like it. Antarctica was never a place I would have expected to go in Resident Evil, but we can in this game, and it's like the best part. I'll touch on it later when I get to Resident Evil 1, but I do actually enjoy the fixed camera angles present in the early titles. The game isn't too long and features some great boss fights, including Wesker. Hey guys, this is me editing here. I just wanted to quick say I misspoke when I said that Wesker's encounters were boss fights. They're mainly just like encounters. They're not traditional boss fights in a sense. Because yeah, he's alive and he'd start to adopt his Blade meets Matrix look already. His boss fights are some of my favorite parts of this game, but in the end, the age of this game really shows. But hopefully the remake will be able to do this iconic title justice.
Resident Evil.
The Revelation sequel is so much better than the first. I absolutely love the setting, especially chapter 1 inside the prison. I love prison settings when it comes to horror and specifically zombies, and I have Mob of the Dead from Black Ops 2 to thank for that. The gameplay is challenging but fun, and even besides the prison, there are great set pieces in this game made great for horror, and also Barry is back, the guy who said the iconic Jill sandwich line himself. And speaking of Jill sandwich, Claire even references it.
I was almost
Jill sandwich.
This game also does the best job at the partner system, where instead of wasting your ammos, your partners can stun the infected or scout and point them out ahead of time. But one of the reasons this game is further down is the fact that it telltales you. You have to pay for the episodes in the game. You can buy the base game and it only comes with one episode, but there's 3 additional story episodes that are all $6 each. Why they did this, I have no idea. Another thing is the villain. Alex Wesker is a very uninteresting villain, but at least her boss fights are fun. On top of the main story, there are also 2 bonus episodes that you can buy that add more depth to the overall story and help it feel more fleshed out. And along with Barry, this is another Claire story as well, which is always great. But the added cost of this game really does sink it for me. And I haven't mentioned it, but the side modes are usually not that fun in my opinion, but I did actually enjoy the raid mode in this one. Don't buy the map pack though.
Resident Evil 6.
Now, some may be surprised by the placement of this one, given what I said about 5. And while this game is more action-focused, you still have Leon's that give us great settings and horror elements. Chris's story is super action-focused again, but he does play at the playground, so there's that. Jake's story is surprisingly enjoyable with the Nemesis at home Ustanok. Ada's story is okay. She has no partner like the others, and if anything, this campaign just shows that Ada is a better supporting character than she is a protagonist. She also has a doppelganger, but that's pretty meh. The campaigns are all mostly separate, which is nice, but they do have a few overlapping moments, mainly in Leon's portion, and you really do have to play all 4 to answer some questions from the others. This game also gives us zombies again, for better and for worse. The main villain is a nothing, and he provides an okay boss fight. The 3 companion characters are great as well, with us even getting to see Sherry Burke and all grow up. The settings and areas you travel in are a mixed bag, with some of them being fun areas with great atmosphere, and then you get boring ones. Again, not really a fan of bases and facilities. Although my favorite has to be the church crypts. It's a cool and creepy lab setting that also kind of has a prison element to it. But enough about the setting. Let's talk gameplay. This game took my issues with 5's gameplay, especially with the partner system, and fixed it. My partner didn't screw me over a single time when I replayed this, and they had better trigger discipline even though the inventories are not shared, but I digress. It's okay as a survival horror, as some of the campaigns, looking at you Chris, really lose all aspects of it. This is also one of the games where I get an itch to want to replay it, mainly to get all the serpent tokens so I can unlock everything, because my ADHD says I should, until I get uninterested, then come back to it in 5 years. But one thing I really need to say about this game is it gets way more hate than it should, but it's still not as amazing as the next 6 on this list. And considering the series soft rebooted after this game, I hope this wasn't our final time with some of these characters.
Resident Evil.
Now, I know some people are going to be upset that this isn't higher, but I can explain why I personally have it lower. First off, I like that this game gives us another person's perspective of the night of the Raccoon City outbreak, and Jill's struggle to cope with what happened at the mansion is compelling enough, but ignored after the first scene. This game is one of the shortest in the series, spanning about 6 hours in the remake and only about half an hour longer in the original. The story starts off very simple. We need to escape the city, then do a quest for a vaccine, and of course to either escape from or kill the main man himself, Nemesis. Now, what does elevate this game is Nemesis. It's hard to say who the best Resident Evil villain is, but for me currently it's a tie between Nemesis and Wesker. Wesker is not only a stalker enemy, but you also have multiple boss fights with him. The one in the plaza in the remake is my personal favorite. This game does function really well as a survival horror. Nemesis' presence and the threat he is never forgotten throughout the game, as you're going to be constantly trying to weave around him or have to take an alternate route entirely to escape him. It's good to have Jill as the main character again, and Carlos is a fun side character. But beyond that, there isn't much. Nikolai really isn't a good twist, in quotation marks, a villain. This is, however, a perfect example of a survival horror. You get very little breathing moments without Nemesis's presence, and even when he isn't there, there's always some threat or an uncomfortable feeling, like nowhere is safe in this game, not even in the save rooms, and despite its fault, that does massively help this game's placement in the long run.
Resident Evil.
The game that started this entire franchise, and yes, I put it above 3. I can sense the anger already. But hear me out, this game, especially the remake, is fantastic. While many people don't like the fixed camera angles, I really like them in this game. It adds a more claustrophobic and panic sense to the game, really putting you in the head of how Chris and Jill are probably feeling in this situation. The boss fights in this game, I won't lie, are incredibly easy. I usually only died to Crimson Hands or zombies. One of the boss fights isn't even a boss fight because all you do is turn on a generator and push it into the water to electrocute a shark. This game also has some choices which can lead to characters actually dying because they didn't know that they had such a successful series on their hands that would spawn a ton more games and some subpar movies. There isn't a location in this game I dislike either. I love the mansion, the woods, the graveyard, the guest house, and even the caves and lab. I usually dislike facility areas like the lab. This game's limited inventory leads to a lot of backtracking, which can get really annoying at times, especially Chris with his 6 slots. Come on now, Chris. Do better. If you can punch boulders, you can carry more stuff. The puzzles in this game are very fun and simple. The animal heads are a personal favorite of mine, and the remix edition of Lisa Trevor really adds to the terrible things Umbrella has done to people. And even though Wesker's betrayal is very obvious as he disappears, then randomly appears at stages of the game, but he did fix one doorknob, so thanks, man. In Chris's route, we see what became of Rebecca from Resident Evil 0, even though 0 wasn't out yet, but shut up. The game doesn't take very long either, but is one of the longer ones in the series. but it really doesn't feel like it. Chris and Jill are very one note at this stage, but it's fine because we got motherfucking Barry Jill Sandwich Burton, baby. This game also has several endings that you can get, making it very replayable, even if you can just save before a big choice and go from there. At the end of the day, while this game is very simple in some ways, it only adds to being one of the best in the whole series. This game rocks. 7 and 8 really brought back the horror elements of this series that have been missing in 5 and 6. You have some classic horror characters, like a tall vampire lady and her daughters. You have creepy dolls and a giant baby thing. You also have a dude that's thirsting for a woman, and he can become a giant fish naturally. You have a guy that can control metal, but I hate him. Fuck Heisenberg. I hate his dumb factory. I hate his voice. I hate the way he says Ethan.
I'll give you that, Ethan.
And it only makes killing him in that kick-ass boss fight all the more satisfying. Sorry, I got a bit heated there. Finally, there's a weird cult bitch who wants to steal your daughter and resurrect her daughter that died over 100 years prior. Like, just get over it already. And instead of zombies, we get lichens, which are very challenging at times. Oh, and Heisenberg's weird metal guys, but fuck that section of the game. The story of this game is simple, but compelling and interesting. You learn a lot about the lore of the franchise, revealing that Mother Miranda had a slight hand in a lot of events that unfolded in the series. And we also learn why Ethan can take so much damage, which I won't say because I try to spoil as little as I can. Chris is also more prominently in this game, and like the great friend he is, he starts off by shooting your wife. Like, damn, dude, did Jill reject you or something? There's always Jessica, I guess. But there's a good reason why Chris does this. I won't explain why Chris is in the right doing that. I do already have an itch to replay this game, and this was the most recent one I replayed before writing this script. Something about it is just so fun. The set pieces are gorgeous too. I'll put up some screenshots I got while playing, but god damn, this game looks good. The entire setting of the village, castle, dollhouse, and reservoir are all great. Except the factory sucks. It just doesn't fit the vibe of the village or the game at all. And like I said, I hate Heisenberg. Finally, this game has some fun bonus content, mainly in the Shadows of Rose DLC. And while that DLC is the classic it's all in the head trope, it still adds more fun to this already great game.
Resident Evil 2.
The first game to take place in Raccoon City, it was also the game that introduced the best protagonist, Leon Sex Appeal Kennedy, and some of the best characters in the series in Claire Redfield and Ada Wong. This game has so many positives going for it, it's very hard for me to find things I don't like, so to be honest, I'm just not going to try to reach and say any. All of these top 3 are S tier for me. The story might be one of the only weaker aspects, but it's still good. Learning much more about Umbrella's influence and ties within the RPD. The tight, narrow corridors of the RPD, the sewers, and the laboratory lend to a great feeling of tension. And especially while playing the remake, there were times I genuinely got jump scared a little bit. The A and B scenarios are a great way to get you to replay, being able to see how Leon and Claire's nights unfolded before meeting at the end. Even if the remake lacks the true A and B scenarios, it still provides a reason to replay. The actual gameplay and boss fights are a major highlight too. This game gives some of the most fun and challenging boss fights in the series. I even own the board game version of this game too. The lockers and armory room provide you a good reason to explore the whole RPD building to get all the weapons possible. And it's even possible to miss certain weapons or make them unable to get in the B scenario, which I think is a great addition. All in all, this game is fantastic, and there are only 2 games that I think are better than it.
Resident Evil 7.
Having this game as second may be surprising to some of you, but one big thing that impacts this game's placement for me is the fact that this was my first one. I played it when it first came out in 2017 due to watching Pyrocynical play it. This is the game that got me into Resident Evil, and despite it being first person, I still love the third person games as well. But to talk about the actual game, it is easily one of the best survival horror games in the series. The atmosphere is creepy and unnerving. The Baker family is a terrifying yet challenging group, particularly Jack, who serves as my personal most annoying stalker enemy in the series. The game isn't too long and the story is pretty simple and good, introducing a new aspect, and I guess you could say virus type, to freshen the series up, along with giving us a new protagonist in Ethan Winters, who has some good moments. The actual Baker family estate is awesome and I love it. I also love the cave and the mine section. The only setting I don't like is the boat. because it's stupid, but it does provide us with some good context and story to help us better understand Mia's babysitting job. The first-person perspective in this game adds a bit of a challenge that isn't as present in the third-person titles. The use of VHS tapes throughout the game help add depth and show what the Bakers have been doing in the shadows under Evelyn's control. Well, except Lucas, who's just an asshole. There's a couple different endings, kinda, and a Wesker reference pistol upon replaying, which helps its replayability, but not by much. This game also contains some of the best DLC and bonus content in the series. Banned footage, Not a Hero, and End of Zoe are all great additions to this game, and helping us adapt to the time gap between 6 and 7, even showing us at the end that Neo Umbrella is still present, and that Chris Redfield is working with them. Overall, this game has some great fights, set locations, and the nostalgia factor it has for me solidifies its position in second. But there's only one game that beats it.
Resident Evil 4.
Of course, this one was going to be at the top of the list. It's one of the best games of all time, original and remake. Once again, we get Leon Sex Appeal Kennedy as our main character on the quest to find the president's missing daughter. A simple premise that leads into the rest of the game's events and the struggles Leon has to endure in finding and rescuing her. This game was the first of the more action-oriented game. That isn't a bad thing in this scenario, as it still had its horror footing with plenty of difficulty and moments of no action perfectly juxtaposed with action-heavy sequences. Like I said earlier, this game has Leon, so that's bonus points already. The other characters are alright, but they still all matter. And Ashley, well, she has the ability to burst your eardrum screaming and is pretty vulnerable for the entire game. At least she doesn't waste my ammo or is the reason I died most of the time. The setting of this game is also iconic, starting off in a small village, then you have the lake, Salazar's castle, and some cool ruins on the island later on. The only location I don't like is the lab and facility, but even that isn't too bad in my opinion. The game isn't too long either, and it feels satisfying to play. Not to mention it has some of my favorite boss fights of the whole series, even if Sadler is a pretty cheesy villain at the end of the day. This also has one of the best sets of bonus content with a mercenaries mode I actually want to play, and a story showing us what Ada was doing during Leon's adventures. Last but not least, even with some of the rewards you get for when you replay the main story, it's just worth replaying anyways, and just typing this out makes me want to go back and play it again already. And of course, I can't forget about the main man himself, the motherfucking shopkeeper. And that's that. Thanks so much for watching this one, guys. It really means the world to me, and a huge thank you for coming from the Assassin's Creed video. That video did better than I ever could have dreamed of it doing. Like I mentioned in the intro, this is not going to be a rankings channel, as I want to do more stuff that's less scripted and serious while also doing more videos like this. So if that sounds interesting to you and you haven't already, a sub really means a lot to me, as well as a like on the video, and comment what you want to see me do next. Finally, before I head out, I want to restart the streams I did a very long time ago on Twitch. I actually wanted to do a fun series of streams where I'd be doing the Resident Evil Hardcore Gauntlet, where I have a wheel of the games and we play on the hardest difficulty for each one, but every time I die, I switch games. I got the idea from a YouTuber named Dre, where he did pretty much the same thing, but only gave himself 3 days to do it. Highly suggest going and watching that video, but let me know if that's something you'd want to see me do, and with all that said and done, I hope to see you all next time.